I understand that Tom Nelson is now claiming he never agreed to the subjects we debated, and that I didn't allow him to discuss broader topics. For those who didn't watch my video showing the 90-minute debate with Tom Nelson, it went something like this.
And I still haven't received your essay on Lord Kitchener.
No, because what happened was I was going around cars, but then this whole thing happened because Shelley Todd is a bitch anyway. I've been completely going around saying that Destiny stole money out of Rochelle's purse, but I ain't not even spoken to Rochelle because she flicked Dash Michaela's hair.
Vicky, I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in your coursework.
No, because what happened was this whole thing happened. I didn't even
So just to be clear, Tom chose his 3 topics to debate, not me, and I chose my 3 topics. Tom was the one who wanted the debate in order to address my criticism of his movie, and I was able to do this face-to-face because I happened to be closer to his time zone, and because of a cancelled trip, I had a week to spare to prepare my material. Now, I don't know what his beef in detail is, because I don't want to go over hours of his chattering podcast to find out, but if that's what he's saying, well, those are the facts. Of course, during the debate, Tom tried to divert into issues like whether I believe that CO2 is the control knob of the Earth's temperature, because then it becomes an argument about how best to describe something. It's a great way to describe it, but what matters to scientists are the numbers, the evidence to support an inference that long-term temperature changes over the last 500 million years correlate to changes in CO2 concentration, combined with the gradual increase in solar irradiance over time and occasional periods of intense volcanism causing a rise in aerosol concentration. And the answer is yes, the evidence clearly supports that. Since solar output rise is steady over billions of years and aerosol effects are short-lived, researchers have found that nearly all of the long-term changes in temperature are driven by changes in CO2 concentration. That's why several climatologists have called it the Earth's thermostat. Others call it the primary driver of Phanerozoic climate and the principal control knob of long-term temperature. I wasn't going to get into a debate about what to call it. I was only interested in the claim made in the movie that I showed was wrong. Sorry, I'm going to have to show you a 3-minute clip from the debate. I promise it'll be the only one, but it makes an important point about debating these guys.
You think that CO2 drives the temperature, but the temperature drives the CO2. That's why Tony Heller said that. That
well, he
oceans.
Was hang on. I'll just quote you what Tony Heller said.
Yep.
Ice ages start when CO2 is at its maximum. Okay.
Yep.
Clearly, that is not the case. It was certainly at a minimum in the Carboniferous, and it's at a minimum for the ice age we're in. So that's incorrect. That's incorrect information. I'm sorry.
You're saying, let's see, what was the CO2 level during the Carboniferous? In parts per million?
It was actually pretty similar to now, probably a little bit more.
So, yeah, that's why Tony Heller said that. I heard him say that in a different debate that he had with you. You went back and forth on video. And near as I can tell, he said that because of the correlation between CO2 and temperature being backwards, that because as the oceans warm, they can hold less CO2 and thus atmospheric CO2 goes up. That's what he's talking about. And when CO2 hits its maximum, when it hit, then it turns back the other way and then you get the cooling.
Whatever he was talking about, he was wrong. When he says that ice ages happen when CO2 is at its maximum, as you can see from this reconstruction of CO2 and ice ages, that is completely wrong.
So what you're arguing is that CO2 is the climate control knob, right? That's the central part of this argument.
I'm arguing is that Tony Heller was wrong to say that ice ages start when CO2 is at its maximum, as you can see in front of you in this reconstruction, which shows when ice ages happened and what the level of CO2 was. I'm just saying he's wrong.
You're saying he's wrong because CO2 is the climate control knob, or what does cause
he's wrong because, as you can see, and as geologists have concluded, CO2 was at a minimum when ice ages started. He's wrong.
When ice ages started at a minimum, okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, but when did the cooling start? When did the cooling start for that particular cool period?
Well, you can see here from the reconstruction. They started as we go into the Carboniferous, and the cooling started as we go into the Quaternary, and again, cooling started as we go into the Ordovician icehouse because of CO2 going down. So
because of CO2 going down. Because you're saying that CO2 is the climate control knob. You said that because?
No. I didn't say that.
Okay.
Tony Heller is wrong.
Okay.
You need to get back to what Tony Heller said in your movie that you supposedly did your homework on. He made a statement that was incorrect. You can lead it in different directions and jangle keys at me and hope I'm going to divert from this. But sorry, we're bringing this back to the statement he made in your movie, and he was wrong. Now, you can talk about to move on, we'll go on to something else, or you can keep trying to argue that somehow black is white, but you can see from the reconstruction that's wrong. And don't try and tell me the reconstruction is wrong, because that's used by climate skeptics all the time.
Oh, okay. I'm saying, yeah, let's be done with that.
And towards the end of that exchange, I have to admit, I broke my own cardinal rule on interviewing politicians. When you've nailed them, caught them in a lie, and they don't know how to get out of it, then you shut up. But that's okay. He was clearly faced several times with the reality that CO2 levels dropped at the beginning of ice ages and were at a low, contrary to what was claimed in the movie. I was also delighted to nail him into admitting that the movie airbrushed out 40 years of warming. It was that easy. The excuse he gave was that he and the people at the CO2 Coalition who made the film don't believe in this recent warming, which they call the spike of doom. So even though it's real and measured by satellites and modern instruments, they just took it out because they didn't agree with it, and they didn't tell anyone. Maybe Tom was getting a bit worried about such an honest admission, because he then tried to claim that the dotted line at the end, the spike of doom as he calls it, is not in Ljungqvist's study.
Yep, there is a spike of doom on there that's not in his study. It's not there. We're showing what's in his study.
I said it is, and I showed the study, but in case there's any doubt, I've put a link to the study in the video description so you can check that for yourselves. Tom's final excuse was to claim that the movie showed Ljungqvist's original construction.
We showed his actual graph, as I've said many, many times. We showed the actual graph.
I checked again and confirmed it's not shown. I've always said that the best way to debunk someone is to check their sources and see what's been altered. Because it's hard to push a narrative that's 180 degrees the opposite of science unless you change the science that's been published. Climate, the movie, doesn't usually give any sources, and when it does, they're hard to find because the information is often wrong. I could only debunk the movie's phony recreation of the Willie Soon graph after Tom gave me a link to the paper. He probably genuinely didn't think it would hurt because of Soon's fossil fuel affiliations. Whatever the reason, having a source led me to the deception. And while Tom claims not to see how this movie completely faked a reconstruction of rural temperature to push up warming in the 1940s and push down the recent rise in temperature, the important thing is that everyone else can see it, and they can see how this artificial manipulation gives the movie the artificial conclusion it wants to push.
That temperatures recover, but are still today barely higher than they were in the 1940s.
But while he gave up that source quite readily, Tom was very, very cagey about sources for this claim.
Years ago, we see the rise of the first great civilizations, in a blissful period which, according to many studies, was considerably warmer than today.
Even this guy looked sceptical. Over a 2-week period, I repeatedly asked Tom to cite these many studies, and asked again, and again. And I eventually warned him I'd ask again during the debate. So, after Tom made this surprise claim...
So I sent you tens of studies. I sent you tens of them as part of this no-trick zone thing. I'm looking at them here. They go on and on.
I went back over the emails. There was nothing indicating any source for the claim about considerably higher temperatures during the rise of great civilizations. Now, he did send me links to several blogs, including this one marked, "A large amount of extremely important information for you is here," which I scrolled through. Okay, it's written by someone called Kenneth Richard 7 years ago, with a lot of stuff about the Marcotte graph and the hockey stick and the supposed climate scam. Notice anything? No, me neither. It was only after the debate that Tom told me this link contained the studies that showed temperatures during the rise of civilizations were considerably warmer than today. Okay, where? Well, you have to scroll down to page 7 of this 21-page blog. You wouldn't know these were the studies because they're labelled the table of contents for the 32 reference reconstructions extending to the right y-axis. So it's a great strategy for someone who doesn't want people to check his sources. Bury them in a long blog and don't say what they are. So why was Tom trying so hard to conceal them? Because, of course, they don't say temperatures during the rise of civilizations were considerably warmer than today or anything like it. They all relate to ocean temperatures, including the one I pushed Tom to reluctantly cite during the debate. And the title gave it away. The Sachs study was not dealing with global temperatures during the rise of the great civilizations, and it wasn't comparing any temperatures to the 21st century. It was looking at cooling ocean temperatures in the northwest Atlantic over the Holocene. And a closer look at the paper shows the possible reasons for that: declining insolation, increasing convection in the Labrador Sea, and equator-wide shifting of the Gulf Stream path. From this, the movie concluded, or perhaps I should say pretended, that the study said temperatures all over the world were 4 to 10 degrees higher during the rise of the great civilizations compared to now. And of course it said nothing of the sort. When I checked all the other studies on that list, they were nearly all looking at ocean temperature changes in regional areas. None of the papers cited compared temperatures back then with the modern period of warming over the last 50 years. But you see what I mean about getting hold of the source and checking it. The lobby groups will make all kinds of claims about what studies say, but they never want to cite them because then that claim can be checked. So finally revealing the sources may have come too late for the debate, but at least Tom's admitted these are supposed to be his sources, so we've unearthed another source of misinformation in the movie. And finally, there was this.
The CO2 Coalition says in its mission statement, it's very clear, it was on the website, it's been altered now, but it said that its mission was to promote CO2 and fossil fuels. That's your mission.
Did it say that? To promote fossil fuel? Did it say that ever?
Yes, it did.
To promote fossil fuels.
Do you want me to show it to you?
No, I don't. I want you to say what this...
Well, sorry, Tom, but I'm going to show it anyway. I downloaded this a few years ago when I was doing research for a video. And obviously someone at the CO2 Coalition was as sensitive about proclaiming themselves to be a fossil fuel lobbying group as Tom was, because now they've dropped the fossil fuel reference and just say they're in favour of CO2. So these are the people behind the movie, and that might explain their motivation in faking graphs, hiding sources, and misrepresenting studies. I've debated a real scientist before, when a professor of geophysics questioned a book I'd written on seismology. The difference then was that we were both interested in resolving our differences and understanding the facts. When I showed evidence to him, he understood what a real graph looked like and why you can't mix statistical means over different periods of time, and he presented me with actual evidence, not just feelings, beliefs, and descriptions. So we could understand when we got our facts wrong and accept it. It was calm and orderly because our aim was to understand reality. So I knew this debate with Tom was not going to be like that. People who lobby for industries and vested interests don't want to discuss the science. They want to support their beliefs. If you agree with their beliefs, you're on their side. If you don't agree with their beliefs, you're on the other side. If changing graphs, airbrushing out contradictory information, hiding sources and misrepresenting studies is what it takes to support those beliefs, then it's perfectly okay. If the other person is trying to make a point that gets to the facts and the reality, then do everything you can to interrupt, filibuster, and deflect. What matters outside the world of science is not getting to the truth, but what they call winning. By the way, all the questions Tom asked while he was trying to get me to talk about anything other than the scientific errors in his movie, I've already answered in previous videos. Like, are we seeing more extreme weather events? Is CO2 the control knob of temperature? So if you want those answers, you'll find them in my climate playlist. Thanks for watching.